Hello and welcome to the Mad Knitting YouTube channel. My name is Susan. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am coming to you from my home in Madison, Wisconsin. I am madtown_mama on Instagram, and I am madtown mama without the underscore on Ravelry. So you can find me those places. If Ravelry is not a site you can use, then I'm very sorry. I spend a lot of time on Instagram, so you can always find me there and yeah, see what I'm up to in life. Today is December the 23rd, 2021. It's Thursday, just a couple days before Christmas. I'm coming to you from my basement. Usually I just set up in my kitchen, but today I'm coming to you from the basement because my teenage children are still asleep and I don't want to disturb them. Plus I'm a little self-conscious about recording still, so I'm hoping to get this done before they're up and, you know, making me feel even more self-conscious even though I know they don't care. Anyway, on this channel I talk about the stuff that I'm making that's almost always knitting, but there may be another craft or two thrown in there from time to time. I also sometimes talk about what I'm reading or discuss current events, just kind of whatever's on my mind. We're in episode 7, so I've been doing this since October, and I've been thinking lately about like why I started this channel in the first place, because I'm not like setting out to gain a huge following or be an influencer. I have absolutely no desire to like try to turn this into a business of any kind. I'm not a designer. I don't dye yarn. I don't make stuff to sell. But there is just something really compelling about sharing what I am doing and what I am making with the world. Back in the dinosaur ages, you know, the aughts, I had a knitting blog. It's still out there somewhere. I just haven't posted to it in years. And I had a lot of fun using that as a way to document the things I was making and, you know, write about the process. And I think that the more visual platform of YouTube, well, blogs are pretty visual, but I don't know, something about this format allows me to do that in a way that that seems very appealing right now. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff on Instagram and we can share there, but you know, Instagram, it's so like literally you just scroll through, you don't always stop and read captions. It's just not always the best place to document more about the process and stuff. So that's part of the reason I do this. Another thing is that I started a new job in early October and went from working in an office around people all day to working from home, which is pretty isolating. I really like my job. It was definitely a good move for me, but I spend a lot of time like by myself at home doing my work, and something about making these videos so that I can put them out there for strangers to watch feels a little less isolating. So I guess that's why I'm doing this for now. So what I wanted to talk about today is show you some things that I finished for holiday gifts and also talk about some plans that I have coming up. I probably won't get to reading because I doubt there will be time, and I haven't finished the book that I was talking about weeks ago, and that's just not the headspace I'm in. So I will just move right along to the knitting. So there are some people that knit a lot of gifts for other people, and then some people that don't. I'm one of those people who frequently knits for other people. Part of it's because I knit all the time, and if I only knit for myself, like I would be buried in hand knits. I practically am anyway. But also there are just people in my life that I really love to make things for. It's my love language, I guess. And I'm sure that if you've been watching, you have figured that out, because I sent a whole box of stuff to my brother and his family, for example. I make things for friends just because I want to sometimes. Every once in a blue moon, I will make something because somebody asked me to, but that almost never happens. So also I've been doing this for long enough that I have learned many hard lessons about choosing the right projects for people. So in my opinion, it is an act of love to make something for someone else, but it's also important that you think about what they want and really make sure that you're making it for them, not making it to gratify yourself, if that makes any sense. I have many times chosen projects that just weren't really appropriate for the person I gave it to. Like, I don't know, I could list many examples. Either because it's something they just wouldn't wear. Like several years ago, I made a sweater for my husband. He never wore it. He's just not a sweater guy. I should have known better. Or if you choose scratchy yarn, or, you know, once, oh, this is funny. Once I made some socks for my father-in-law, and I know that he appreciated them, but I was a pretty new sock knitter, and I was not paying attention to the yarn I used, and it was like a non-superwash wool. So he wore them one time, and then they went through the wash and they were felted socks and unwearable. So sometimes stuff like that happens too. Anyway, so I think that part of this whole idea of it being an act of love to make something, create something for somebody else, is to really put a lot of thought into what they would love and would use. Sometimes this means involving them in that decision. For example, my daughter specifically asked for a holiday sweater, and we spent some time together choosing a pattern. She told me exactly what color she wanted. And then she was excited to see the progress as I was working on it. And because it wasn't a secret, even though it was her birthday present, she was able to try it on a few times as I went along so I could make sure that it fit. And the whole thing was just very fun and very satisfying. And yeah, like a win as far as gift knitting goes. So with all that said, I choose my projects carefully. I still don't always get it right, but I think I have gotten better over the years. So what I'm going to do now is show you a pile of things that I have finished for Christmas gifts. And yeah, for now, they all fit in this basket. So I just have it sitting on my lap, and I'll show you what I've made. The big stuff that I made was sent in that box to my brother and his family. So these are sort of smaller, simpler things. So I'm going to start with something that I have made for my parents. They are actually on their way here today. They are driving up. We have all taken rapid tests and tested negative. And they have not been to see us in 2 years. Christmas 2 years ago was the last time they were here. So this is exciting and it's a big deal. So what I decided to do was knit them some coasters out of mostly holiday colors. I got this idea from Susan B. Anderson. She had posted on Instagram a while ago, maybe a month or two ago, about using leftover worsted weight yarn to knit these little squares, and she put a lot of them together in sort of a quilt style. But I thought, now those would be cute little coasters. So I did something similar. Let me show you the ones I started with, because I thought I was gonna like be all creative. So like I have some stripe action going on here. This is just worsted weight wool. I have kind of a wonky log cabin deal going on here. 3 colors. These are definitely Christmas colors. And then I decided to go on a red and gray jag. This is mostly Cascade 220, I think. There might be some Valley Yarns, Northampton. Here's greens. So what I settled on eventually was this simpler garter stitch square surrounded by, you know, garter stitch borders. And the way I did it, I didn't use a pattern, but I just cast on, I used a slightly smaller needle than you would normally use for this weight yarn. I think I used a size 6 because I wanted it to be kind of dense and firm. So I cast on 14 stitches, knit and garter until I had a square. Wait, cast off, where was it? Okay. And then I picked up around the side, knit this border, picked up around the side, knit another border, and so forth until I had all 4 sides done. So yeah, I have a set of these. I'll give some to my mom and some to my dad, and you know, hopefully they'll like them. I think they're cute. I knit like 3 of these just this morning because I woke up early and they go pretty fast. So that's one gift. No pattern, just my own improvisation. Let's see. I actually do have notes here. All right, so I decided to make socks for my kids, so I'll show you those next. I have been showing you the progress on these. These are for my daughter. These are the Smooth Operator socks, which is a pattern by Susan B. Anderson. Clearly I'm a fan of hers. I used Felici sock yarn by Knit Picks. I think the name of this colorway is Base Jump. And I really love the orange in there. So I found some contrasting, coordinating, I should say, orange yarn for the heel. This is yarn that I dyed myself eons ago out of food dyes and hadn't used, and it was a really good match for the stripes. So yeah, these went pretty quick once I got going on them. When it comes to self-striping yarn, I like either doing a short row heel or this afterthought heel where you put in waste yarn and then add the heel later, because then your stripes don't get interrupted. I think generally this heel, this afterthought, fits the foot better than a short row heel. And I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's because it's a little deeper, so you get a little more room. So that is what I finished for my daughter. For my son, I made a pair of socks as well. I'm crossing my fingers that they fit. I did tell him to close his eyes so I could try it on. So these are not going to be a surprise. But I'm never sure until they actually put them on their feet. And so I have not yet hit in the end at the toe here. But, and just in case, I kept markers in so that I could easily keep track of how many rounds to add if I need to. So this yarn is by Bumblebee Acres. I bought it at the Wisconsin Sheep and Wool Festival this fall. I forget the colorway name, but it's Lord of the Rings themed. And I love how it's just a lot of blues, navy and denim blues. I did not use a pattern for this. I just made socks the way I always do. For his foot, I cast on 72 stitches. I have an Eye of Partridge heel, which is like a slip stitched heel. And the slip stitches kind of go in a checker pattern rather than in a straight line. That's the eye of partridge part. And I always like to do 3 stitches of garter on either side of the heel because that makes picking up the stitches for the gusset just nice and tight and even. So I am very pleased with how that looks. Like I don't have any holes in there. It worked out really nicely. I have also come to like I've come to like in the toe, rather than grafting it together, once you get past sort of the wedge style decreases, doing a bunch of quick decreases and then just pulling the yarn through the remaining stitches. This is a technique that is one of the options in the smooth operator socks, and I just like it. I think sometimes when you graft the toe, it gets a little boxy and you get these like little, I don't know, wings kind of, or like ears sticking up, and I don't really like that, and I think this is just a neater finish. So yeah, so that's how I'm gonna do socks, at least for the time being. I had in the last couple of episodes talked about wanting to make hats for my son and my husband. And the one for my son was just not going very well. I had talked last time about how I had this idea that I would make a lined hat and use kind of a loose gauge, but then the fit was all wonky and it just didn't feel right. So what I ended up doing was holding the yarns doubled and just doing a simple 1x1 rib beanie. So it's got this nice marled look. It took about 4 tries to get the decreases right. I just didn't have great mojo knitting this hat for some reason. I was really frustrated. I mean, it only took a few days to get it actually done, but I was frustrated by different things in my life, and I don't know, it took a few tries. But now that it's done, I really love it. I used Knit Circus yarn. Knit Circus is a local business here. They ship everywhere, but they actually have a brick and mortar store that's open a few hours on Fridays and Saturdays. But one of their bases is called Opulence, and it's like a very lightweight yarn with a mostly superwash merino, but there's a little bit of cashmere and nylon in it. And it's really, really nice, especially as it turns out when you knit it doubled. So when I was working on this hat, even though I was frustrated with it, I kept stopping to sort of squish it because it feels so nice. So yes, this finally got done, and it's nice, and hopefully he'll wear it. He's a teenage boy, so it might take some convincing. For the decreases, I decided to do a 4-point decrease at the top. I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. I might do a lot more hats this way. So yeah, this turned out to be a win after all. As I was working on this, I sort of plopped it on my husband's head to see, just to check the length and see how it fit, and he commented that, ooh, that was nice. So I thought, well, maybe I should make one for him too. I didn't have enough of the Opulence left to make him one. So I picked out some other yarn. Now, I'm going to interrupt myself here to just discuss a couple of things. I had shown on a previous episode some gray yarn that had a little bit of silk in it that I originally was going to use to make him a hat, and at that time I was planning on doing the Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague. I ended up not doing that for a couple of reasons. One, originally when I worked on this, I ended up doing something else, and at the time I didn't have the brain space to read a pattern, even a pattern as simple as the Musselburgh hat, which I have heard is very simple. So I just thought I'm gonna do another one just like my son's. I'll just pick out yarn that I have ready and just do the same thing for him because he seems to like that first one. So that was one reason. And then this week, I don't necessarily mean to talk about, you know, bad things or controversial things on every single episode, but since I talked about that pattern, and since I brought it up again, I figure I should just make this point. On Instagram, there were a couple of dyers who posted about Isolde and some extremely unprofessional behavior from her this fall. Essentially, she bought some of their yarn from their Etsy shops, told them that she was coming out with a pattern collection, like around the holidays, wanted assurance that they would have plenty of their yarn in stock so people could buy it when she released those patterns. And then she flaked out and changed her mind and ended up not doing the pattern release, leaving them with piles of stock that now is going to be really difficult for them to sell. So that is just so unprofessional. It is so harmful. These are women of color, and I think her intent, her stated intent, was to, you know, highlight makers who have been marginalized in this community and in this world, and she just ended up exploiting them and using them and just leaving them high and dry with very little explanation, no communication, and she should have known better. Isolde Teague has been a very well-known, very high-profile designer for years, and if she couldn't manage her time to get this release done, she should have at least communicated that with them. So there's a lot more that others have said about it, so I'll just leave it at that. But point is, now I'm glad that I didn't buy that pattern. I will not be buying that pattern, and I will not be knitting it, because I'm not going to support somebody who treats other people that way, knowingly. So what I did then, for my husband, I found some really similar yarn, pretty much did the same thing. It's a little bit thicker, so I cast on fewer stitches, but I did the same 4-point decrease at the top. You can see that it's a little bit lighter. Like, I still had that sort of gray and blue, but this gray is lighter, so the whole thing sort of came out a little more marled looking. And so this hat is for him. It's interesting because the fiber content is very similar between the yarn that I used for this and the Knit Circus Opulence, but the spin is a lot different somehow. It feels like this one, the yarn is maybe a little ropier. It wasn't quite as like fuzzy. For this, I used Mrs. Crosby Hat Box. I bought a bunch of it on sale from Webs ages ago, like 3-4 years ago, and have been trying to use it up ever since. So I don't remember the colorway names. I've lost those labels long ago, but I was able to use up what I had left of a couple of skeins, so that was a win. Okay, one last little thing to show you. I have a friend that I go walking with every once in a while, maybe once a month, just kind of depending on when both of us have time. And I've noticed that she often will, like if it's chilly outside, she likes to wear a headband. She doesn't always have a whole hat on. So I've never made a knitted headband before. I personally have never felt like wearing one, but I saw this free pattern pop up and I thought, you know, I bet she would like that. So I decided to make her one. I don't even know when I'll see her next. It definitely won't be before Christmas, so I don't even know if I would consider this a holiday gift or just here, I made this for you kind of thing. But here it is. This is called, I have the pattern somewhere. Here it is. This is called the Snowdrop Headband from Along Avec Anna. Never made one of her patterns before. This was a free one. It's got this cool pattern that repeats. You just make this strip and do the repeats until it's just a little bit less than your head circumference, and then stitch it up. So there is a seam here. Mine is not invisible, but I think it's okay. So I learned a new technique with this pattern, and it took a little bit of sleuthing because it wasn't really explained in detail. The stitches you see, it's like this really squishy rib, and she just had something in the chart called a double stitch, which she didn't explain. And it turns out what you do is when you come to it, you lift a leg from the stitch below and knit that, and then you knit the regular stitch from the left needle. So you've made 2 stitches out of the one. And then when you come back on the return row, you knit them both together. So you end up with this like sort of extra big squishy stitch. And I'm thinking maybe this is how you do fisherman's rib. I'm not sure. I've never done fisherman's rib or looked up instructions or anything, but once I figured it out, it was cool. And I really like sort of the fabric this made. The yarn I used is Periwinkle Sheep. This is left over from a project I did last year. And I used exactly what I had left. I mean, I had literally like a couple of pieces this long by the time I was done sewing it up and hiding in the ends. This is Merino DK. It's a superwash yarn, and I can't remember the name of the colorway. I think it might be Pine something. I don't think you can get any more because I ordered it from the Modern Daily Knitting website before she stopped wholesaling yarn to them. So, because I think it was an MDK exclusive color. And when they put it on sale, I bought a whole bunch of it, and I'm still trying to use that up too. Y'all, this is how stash happens. Okay. I've been talking for a long time, and I still haven't even gotten to my plans for the future. So I think I'll just jump right into that. All right. So I am not a big joiner generally. I am more of an observer. I like to lurk on forums online. I don't always contribute. Every once in a while I do. I never join yarn clubs or very rarely pattern subscriptions, things like that. And one thing that's very popular in the making world, knitting, crafting, are like make-alongs, knit-alongs. And I historically have almost never joined those because, I don't know, I don't really need that external motivation necessarily. Clearly I'm plenty motivated on my own to make stuff. Anything with rules really turns me off because then, like, I don't know, there's all this like self-imposed or all this sort of extra stress that doesn't need to be there. However, this past fall or this past year, I did participate in the, what was it called? The Colors of Fall Knit Along. This is sponsored by the Yarniacs podcast. They're an audio podcast. They're one of my favorites. And they have a couple of big make-alongs every year. And what I like about them is that they take place over a long period of time and they're extremely laid back. So the Colors of Fall Knit Along went from the summer solstice or the June solstice. It's not always summer. If if you live in the southern hemisphere, obviously. But anyway, from the solstice in June to the equinox in September. And the only rules were that you had to start and finish within that time, and use colors from the Pantone's fall palettes, or I think they included spring as well. But anyway, there were all these colors, and as long as you could squint at the finished product and see that color, that would count. So I made a bunch of stuff for that just because it was really fun to join along, and everybody in that group is really supportive. And they have another knit along they always do, starting right around the holidays and going through the March equinox, called the Self-Indulgent knit along. And again, the only rules, there are 2 rules. You have to start and finish your project within that time frame. So in this case, between December the 21st and March 20, and it has to be self-indulgent. And you can define that in any way that you want. So yarn that you love, pattern that you've been wanting to make, something for yourself if you normally knit for others, whatever it is. So I thought, you know, I think I'll join that. I think I'll do that. And by joining, all it means is that you use a hashtag on Instagram, and that if you want, you can post photos on Ravelry and, you know, join in the discussion and stuff. And concurrently with that, another one of my favorite audio podcasts, Imagine Landscapes, has, I think it's called the Imagine Knitting Knit Along, Imagine Knitting Knit Along. I forget exactly what they call it. But it's pretty similar, actually. I think, you know, the dates are maybe from Christmas Eve through, I forget when. It's pretty long though. And basically it just has to be something that you've really wanted to knit, and you want it to come to, you know, get out of your imagination and onto the needles. So that really fits the bill with me, because I love knitting and I want to knit what I want. So I'll consider myself joining these with the stuff that I make over the next few months. So I do have some loose plans. They may change depending on the mood I'm in, if I feel like making something for my nieces or whatever. But for now, these are the things that I am thinking about casting on. So while I'm on my Susan B. Anderson kick, she has these kits that she offers on her business, her yarn business, which is called Barrett Wool Co. She designs these adorable stuffed animals and dolls and things, and they have kits for sale, and usually they sell out. But this last time she posted, I managed to get one, and it's just the cutest thing ever. So I have the pattern here someplace, and I don't have a color printer, so it's a little moose, and he's wearing a Christmas sweater. So I want to make it. I don't even know if I'll keep it or if I will give it to one of my nieces. Haven't decided, but it comes in its own little bag, and it of course includes the yarn that is made by her company. So it's the home worsted weight. So there's this lovely brown for the main part, this beige color for the antlers, and I guess the contrast for the sweater. And I think this is for the sweater, and this is probably for like the hooves and maybe some embroidery around the face. So that'll be really fun. Sometimes toys are really fussy to make, but I find that her instructions are very clear, and the way she writes for placement of limbs and things, it makes it just very, very easy for things to turn out looking cute instead of wonky. So I am hopeful that this will turn out. turn out well. So that's one thing I have plans for. I've kind of decided that I would like to focus my knitting, at least for the next little while, on some local yarns, either locally dyed or locally produced. And I have quite a collection in my stash to choose from. So I picked a few out and have matched them with patterns. So here are some more ideas. I mean, actually, Susan B. Anderson lives in the same city as me, and this is Wisconsin produced yarn, so that's local as well, in all the ways, the yarn, the designer, everything. Okay. There is a sweater that I have been wanting to make for years. It is by the designer Kate Davies. It's called the Paper Doll Sweater. It is sold as an individual pattern, and it's also in her book, one of her books. It's called 10 Years in the Making, which celebrates her 10 years of being a designer. And I have a lot of Kate Davies books because I love her patterns, her aesthetic, her writing, and everything. So this is the Paper Doll Sweater. It's called that because of the design there on the yoke that looks like if you fold paper accordion style and then cut out the shape of a person and then unfold it, you know, you get that line of paper dolls. So that's what goes across the yoke. And I love it. I've just always thought it was so charming without being like childish. And when I was at the Wisconsin Sheep and Wool Festival this year, I bought some yarn with that sweater in mind. And I have this big basket on my lap now so I can stop bending over. So it is from Sun Valley Fiber. I'll show you the label first. It's a tweed yarn that is mostly wool. So it's not, I don't think it's locally produced, but it is locally dyed, because Sun Valley is based out of Mount Horeb, which is, I don't know, less than 45 minutes away from here. So I have 3 colors picked out. I've wound 2 skeins. This is called Kindred Spirit. It's a very like dusty pale teal color. This is called Antler. And this one, which I haven't wound yet, is called Dijon. And it really is a mustard yellow. I think it's showing up more green here because the light isn't very good. So I have this for the main color, and I think I will do the dolls in this just because the contrast is better. And then for that little detail sort of underneath the doll part and on the top and maybe on the sleeve, I will use this Dijon. Because I think if I tried to do the dolls with this, like, I actually don't think the contrast is going to be enough for them to show up. So the design is bottom up, like you start with the bottom in one piece and you do the sleeves and then you join it all and go up the yoke. That is not my favorite way to knit a sweater in one piece. I vastly prefer top down. I don't think I can convert the whole pattern to top down. I just think that'll be too complicated. However, plus I don't know that I want short sleeves. I hate how, like, one of the reasons I don't like that bottom up thing is that until the whole thing is put together and you're pretty close to the neck, like, you don't actually know if the length is going to work out just the way you want. I have found many times that if I knit a sweater in one piece, like, I think the sleeves are long enough, then they end up riding up and I have to add length. And I don't want that to happen on a bottom-up sweater. So I'm thinking what I'll do is change the construction so that it's more like the Wintersole sweater that I just finished with for my daughter. The way that one was made, you may recall, is basically you cast on in the middle. So you do a provisional cast on for the entire yoke, and then knit up to the neck and bind off, however that's going to happen. And then you take out the provisional cast on, pick up all the stitches and knit down. And it's after, it's after you pick up those stitches that you divide for the sleeves and the body. So for paper dolls, the complicated part is that yoke section. So if I just do a provisional cast on using however many stitches there are supposed to be for that entire thing after the sleeves are joined, I can just follow the instructions all the way up to the neck. Make sure I like how that fits, and then pick up the stitches and I don't even really need to follow the instructions to do the rest of it, because it's just basically knitting a tube. You can add shaping or not. I can see how much yarn I have left to see if I want to do more of a sleeve than that. You saw in the picture, it's just basically like a little bit of ribbing. It's very short sleeved. I haven't decided if that's what I want. So I think that's what I'm going to do for that one. And I think that'll work. I don't think it'll be too hard to do that. However, that is very complicated. And since my parents are coming, it might be hard to start a project like that over this weekend for the few days they're here. So I have a couple of other sort of accessory projects that I have in mind. One of them is this pattern by Poki Locatelli. It just came out. It's called Some Me Time. It's a shawl. I hope this picture shows it. I think it's a pretty simple shawl. It's got like a main garter stitch part that starts, and then there's this like sort of strips of lace kind of as you get to the edge or get towards the border. And I would like to make it, and it's written for either fingering or sport weight. And I would like to make it out of this other yarn that I bought at Wisconsin Sheep and Wool. This is from Round Barn. They're based in Illinois, so that's not Wisconsin, but it's not far. And I think what they do is purchase fleece from small farms and then mill it. So this is a 2-ply Polworth. It says it's a fingering weight, but it looks like it's pretty bouncy, like it could be knitted at maybe a bigger gauge. And there's 350 yards here, so not quite enough for a whole shawl, but I also have 2 50-gram skeins of fingering weight from Utopia Yarn. That I think would go really nicely with it. Utopia is based out of Viroqua. It's a couple hours west of here. They are fabulous for so many reasons. And this is the Ridge fingering weight yarn. And these colors, this one is just called Cool Temps, and this one is called Warm Temps. And I think what they did for these, they're not, rather than dyeing the yarn, I think what they did is take all the leftover bits of unspun wool that was dyed in cool temperatures and mix that up to make, it's just like all the leftover parts that get spun together for this. And then all the warm colors of wool that are left over, they spin together to make this. So it's kind of a, I don't know, rusty orange color. And then this one is like a dusty, dark green, tealish color. And I think if I alternate these for those lace strips, because they're separated by garter stitch ridges. Can you see that? So I'll use this natural cream color for the main top part and for these in-betweens, and for this lace part, I will use the Utopia. And this, I don't know what the wool content is. I mean, it's all wool. It just says fine wool. It doesn't say like the breed or anything, but it looks like they'll go really well together. And that I think is a simple enough project that I can cast, as soon as I get these wound, I can just cast this on you know, with people around while it's kind of distracting, I think that'll be a good like social project to work on. But that's not all. I haven't even printed out this pattern yet, but there is this hat and mitts set by Alicia Plummer, called the Adventurist Hat and Adventurist Mitts. And that one, the hat has like this cool, I'll put a picture of the pattern page or something so you can see, but it's a very simple like slip stitch pattern that goes up, kind of a colorwork slip stitch pattern. So it's really nice for yarns that change color frequently, or very like variegated, or like, you know, the ubiquitous spin cycle or whatever. And I have this Corriedale. It's like a DK weight, kind of a heavy DK weight. And I bought it at the farmer's market a few years ago. Like, it doesn't even have a label. It was like straight from the people who raise the sheep and then send the fleece off to get the wool milled. So I don't even remember the name of the farm because it was a few years ago that I bought it. But it is about as local as you can get without actually raising the sheep in my backyard. So there's this, and then I have this Helix by Utopia. I talked about the Helix in the shawl and hat that I made for my sister-in-law. This is a different colorway. This is called Country Fair. So, you know, a lot of it's hiding, but it's like a lot of bright rainbow colors. And I just think the two combined in a simple color work slip stitch pattern would be really pretty. And there's plenty, I have plenty left over. I have more than a skein left over. And then this is like 250 yards. So I think that's plenty to make both the hat and mitts. Do I need another hat? No. So I don't even know if I'll keep it. I might just hang on to it and see if it seems like a good gift for somebody who likes bright colors and doesn't mind hand washing. So yeah, so those are my plans. I think that is plenty for today. Thank you for joining me. Sorry to have talked so long. I hope you have a wonderful and safe holiday season and Happy New Year, and I will see you next time.